You're listening to the Jōrni Podcast. Curious about how writing could become a powerful tool for mental, emotional, and physical well-being? Stay tuned to explore more. This episode contains adult subject matter, and some listeners may be triggered by this content. Listener discretion is advised. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Jōrni Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. In this episode, we explore how writing can be a powerful tool for healing and self-discovery. Through the lens of storytelling, we look at how putting our thoughts and experiences into words can help us process emotions, find meaning in difficult moments, and reclaim our sense of purpose. Dr. Gabrielle Pelicci, PhD, is a trauma survivor who found her purpose in teaching and storytelling after a long journey of healing. When Gabby lost her mother unexpectedly in her early adulthood, the devastating grief sent her into a deep spiral of depression. After a failed suicide attempt, she became determined to transform her pain and began a decades-long quest for healing. Her search led her to immerse herself in various traditions, from yoga and meditation to energy medicine and herbalism. Even as she achieved professional success as a professor of integrative medicine, something still felt unfinished. It was during a plant medicine journey in New Mexico that Gabby discovered the power to reclaim her voice and purpose. Dr. Gabby's memoir, All This Healing Is Killing Me, became a #1 Amazon bestseller, inspiring readers to find their own stories. Today, she is a sought-after speaker, storytelling strategist, and creator of transformational writing retreats that empower others to share their stories. Gabby believes that when we courageously tell our truths, we don't just heal ourselves, we create positive change in the world. Here is my interview with Dr. Gabrielle Pelicci. Hi, Dr. Gabby. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because writing for holistic well-being is such an intriguing topic. And honestly, I don't think we've talked about this before on the podcast. So I'm quite excited for today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's my absolute pleasure. I'm kind of very intrigued by this topic that we'll be talking about. So let's start off with maybe a little bit about yourself and how this story started for you and how it relates to what you do today, so our listeners can maybe get an idea of what it is that you do today.
I'm really passionate about personal stories from our history, from our community, from our lives, and how we tell those stories to connect with others and how we tell those stories to heal parts of us that have gotten lost or disconnected, and how we share and express those stories, whether it's doing the podcast or writing a book or giving a talk or things like that. And I've always been really passionate about story. I was an avid reader when I was growing up. I was an avid writer. I had journals and I wrote down everything that was happening all of the time. And it became a way to process things that were happening. I'm someone that grew up with a lot of trauma and violence and unfortunate situations. And by writing, I was able to process the emotions, record the experience, make sense of everything. And then as I got older, I wanted to put those into books. And I wrote 2 books. So I had one that came out in 2022, All This Healing Is Killing Me, and then one in 2024, The Last Ceremony. And the difference between writing in a journal versus publishing a book is that in the book, you have this big space where you have to make sense thematically of the story. Like, what are the themes of your life? What are the patterns? What are the things that keep showing up again and again? And that process was like a massive magnifying glass against my spirit and my mind and my choices, like a massive spotlight. And it just took healing and personal growth and transformation to a whole nother level, just a whole nother level. And that's now what I guide people through. You don't have to have a difficult backstory to write a book, obviously. It could be just some life experience, like we were talking before this call, of you moving from one country to another. And what were those cultural clashes? And how did that change you as a person and make you more resilient or more insightful, right? So it doesn't have to be so difficult, but the human condition is one of change and transformation. That's the hero's journey. We set out to find something, solve something, heal something, and then we find the guides and we find the lessons and we make our way back home again. So for me, writing is holistic. It can't not be. It's all parts of our being. And I love guiding people through that experience, whether it's a small expression of their story for their website, their social media, or whether it's a larger expression of several hundred pages of their story that they want to share. That's how it's all connected for me.
That sounds wonderful. And I also love writing, so I can identify with you in all of this. And I've loved writing from a very young age. And I feel it's a very therapeutic way to process some of the things that happen to us. And it is a little bit like therapy when I write things down, or even when I journal, maybe the shorter pieces of it. But it is very therapeutic. And like you said, bringing that awareness to all the different patterns and things that are happening in our lives is, I think, a very important step in our healing journey. So I can definitely see how writing becomes this holistic tool to help people process things. And now you've written 2 books, and by the time we're airing this, your second book will actually be live for all of our listeners to find online as well. Both of those books are memoirs, and the first book was called All This Healing Is Killing Me, which I thought was such a fascinating title. So would you like to tell us a little bit about what you wrote about and how that came together in your book?
Yeah. The first book is an excavation. It's a deep dive into different life experiences that I had, from the death of my mom when I was young to the spiritual awakening that catalyzed, and then the journey to travel and study different healing modalities. I have a PhD, and in my PhD research, I studied women healers. So I traveled to many countries and I interviewed different healers and I studied different healing traditions. And so it's that whole trajectory of how you heal and what it means to heal, and the different kind of healing practices that I tried and the different kinds of healers that I met. We travel a lot of places in that story, and we have a glimpse of what's possible at the end. Myself, the character in the book, she has a significant breakthrough at the end of finally confronting a lot of the things that she had been avoiding. And the second book picks up where the first book left off. It's the sequel to the first book, because you can have a breakthrough and an awareness, but then you need to rebuild your life around that awareness. You need a significant integration process when you go through those shifts, whether it's a paradigm shift or whether it's a healing crisis, like whatever the case may be. Then you're like, okay, like I survived something. Now what? The second book is then an integration story of using more healing modalities, specifically plant medicine. I worked with peyote and ayahuasca and psilocybin mushrooms. So using a lot of nature, a lot of plants, farming, beekeeping to really create that restoration and that rebuilding a life after realizing that the old life wasn't working. So they're similar but different. And it's really one book in 2 books.
That sounds wonderful. And there's a lot to read in there for our listeners and to experience through your eyes and through your descriptions. Now, I understand this part of that you've touched on of integration, because it's a part that often gets skipped over, or we don't often have the right mentors or people even to work with for this integration. And I find it is kind of difficult to do the integration piece on your own when you've been, like you said, through a huge experience and you realize, I've survived this, now what? Often we need someone to guide us in that or to help us with that. Do you find that when you wrote the first book and you came to this piece of, okay, I'm going to integrate now, how did you do that? Did you process that through more writing, or did you find a mentor or someone to work with to do some of this integration work?
Yeah, all of the above. One of the findings of my dissertation research that the healers told me was that you have to have a support system, that the path of the healer is so transformative, that you're in constant learning and change, and that you're going through life in these cycles of life, death, and rebirth over and over, that if you don't have a support system, you're not going to get through it. You have to have a system. And so I learned that early on and gradually kind of accumulated friends and mentors and colleagues and stuff to rely on. But I do think there's certain periods of your life that you enter into like a sacred void, and it's like there's nobody there to help you. And I think that's really where nature filled that gap for me, is that there wasn't a human that could really hold for me at that point the kind of depth of what my experience was. And I found that in that place, nature really became an ally, a teacher, and a mentor, a significant mentor. I've always been connected to the intangible. I've always had these mystical experiences and spiritual experiences. So to me, it wasn't a big stretch to rely on nature as a mentor. So I think you can have humans. I think you can have plants. I think you can have the ocean. I think you can have invisible guides. I think all of it is accessible. That's how I live my life, very connected to a lot of different resources.
Yeah, it sort of does become part of our support system, but we, I think, also develop more capacity to really, I want to say, almost enjoy the void, because there are times and spaces where it does feel better to do certain things on our own and not with a guide or a mentor. So I see where you're coming from there. I love that idea of having both sort of a wider support network to rely on when you need that, and then also that space that is sort of innately yours, where you can keep developing and keep exploring as well. Now, I'm curious, when you work with others, do they usually come to you and say, Dr. Gabby, I really want to heal, so I'd like to write a book? Or do they start writing and then kind of realize that it is a therapeutic process for them? How does that usually work when you work with clients?
It's 50-50. If someone listens to an interview like this, I've done several interviews like this, and they hear me talk about writing as a portal and a transformative process, and how I was very anxious and uncomfortable before, and how I have such a sense of wholeness and contentment on the other side, which is 100% genuinely honest and true. When they hear me talk about how much writing helped with healing and integration, if that resonates with them, like I have a client right now, I'm going to talk to her today, actually. She said, I want what you have. She's like, I feel like my medicine is writing. And I feel like I've tried a lot of the things that you've also tried. I've tried the talk therapy, I've tried the medications, and I resonate with what you say. And I think writing will help me. And just in our very first session, we were able to go into some significant life events. We were able to find the core story, feel the feelings, process it. And now that one is healed, in the sense that I believe in healing as like an energetic digestion. There's like these things that happen and they sit and they vibrate, and until they're metabolized and they move through us, they're always easily triggered. They're always affecting our nervous system in some way. That's kind of complex, but we can go into deeper if you want. Then there are other people that they just want a book. They give talks or they give interviews or they teach or whatever, and they really just want a book. And then if you work with me, and we go all the way into the really good parts, into the juicy parts, you're going to learn. You're going to laugh. You're going to cry. You're going to go, oh my God, I didn't realize. And then you get this icing on the cake, which is, wow, oh my God, I know so much more about myself, or my story is so much clearer than it was before. So it's both, and it's not one or the other.
That's fascinating. Yeah, because when I first started writing, it definitely wasn't with the intention of healing anything. I wasn't even aware that that could happen. But as I progressed and I started digging up the pieces I wanted to write about, it was very therapeutic. So that's very interesting that it kind of happens that way. And does it take any kind of other precautions or kind of tools that you need to have in place? Because it can get extremely emotional when you're processing things that you have maybe stuffed down there for decades and you're now bringing them to the light and working with them. What do you recommend when you work with people, how they should maybe care for themselves or take care of even the people around them while they're going through this process of birthing a book and healing at the same time?
Yeah, that's a really smart question. That's a really insightful question. And yeah, we talk about it right from day one. I have them do an intake form, and depending on the significance of the trauma, they have to have other things in place. They have to have a therapist in place. They have to have other self-care in place, depending on what we're going to be talking about and what we're going to be writing about, because it's out of scope. I'm not doing therapy with you, but I am opening up all the things, and all of the things are coming up. I consider myself a trauma-informed writing coach, meaning that I've been there, I've done that, and I can see if you start to get symptoms. I can see if you start to get overwhelmed. I can see if you're getting dysregulated, and I can say, okay, call your therapist, go to yoga, do all the things you need to do. And I work face-to-face on writing retreats with people in West Palm Beach, Florida. And when they come, we never work focused for more than 2 hours without stopping and eating and walking and breathing. We only do it in chunks. And I've had a lot of people say to me, oh my God, like this is totally rewired how I approach my work or my practice. Like I didn't realize how frequently you're supposed to stop, check in, regulate, breathe, have a glass of water. How am I feeling? How am I feeling? And that you're supposed to have this kind of a well-being pace to the work, which is also not something anyone ever taught me. But because I was pursuing writing and I was pursuing healing, I could feel like, oh, this is too much. What can I do? Let's go to the gym, or let's take a shower, a cold shower. I could feel and I could navigate. And that's something that I offer that I think a lot of other writing coaches or teachers will not say. They'll put you in a weekend workshop where you're just at a desk for 3 days or something. And it's like, no. Maybe if you're writing a book on how to make widgets or something, that's fine, but no, not if you're writing about deeply personal things.
That's actually really good advice, I feel, because I think most of our jobs are not laid out this way either. And we spend sometimes 8 hours straight in front of the computer, and it's not that great for our well-being. So taking those breaks and taking care of ourselves is an important piece of being able to be present for writing these deeply emotional things that we're writing in these books. So yeah, that makes a lot of good sense. Is this available only to people who live in Florida, or do you also work with people online when you work with them on the books?
Yeah, both. I mean, people fly here. You mentioned you lived in Canada. People fly here from Canada and wherever to work with me. And then I also work remotely with people online, and both are really effective. They're equally effective. I think just having that mentoring and that accountability makes the process so much easier. And I sought that out for myself throughout my whole writing career, right? I've been writing and publishing since 2004, maybe for about 20 years. And I always sought out writing groups, writing teachers, writing classes, writing mentors. I was always like, where are my people? And I always tell people that work with me, don't just rely on me. Find the writing groups, make a writing group, pick a friend, go to a cafe, write together. I think we have this notion with creativity a lot of times, that it's very lone wolf and you're just by yourself. I had to spend a lot of time by myself when I was writing, but I also had to spend a lot of time giving it to friends, asking for feedback, going to meetups, talking about what is good writing, what is bad writing, how do you publish something, what's that process, how do you sell it, what if you can't sell it? It's just like such a huge endeavor in every kind of way. So yeah, we can work remotely and find community, find other people that are also doing this. I also kind of feel, I don't know if this is true for you, but I feel like we're becoming a bit more rare now with all the content creation that is audio video. I do think it's becoming rare that you're willing to spend so much time crafting something like this in your own words, as opposed to like AI content, AI content.
Yeah, absolutely.
There has to be a real calling. There has to be a real devotion to this. It's like, I have to write or I want to write. I'm also really curious going forward what the future of writing looks like, because I use AI when I need to. I'll tell AI like, oh, I want to write this post, like help me organize, blah, blah. It's not this. It's not this. The excavation, the exploration, the introspection, the reflection, the refinement, the editing, it's just apples and oranges. AI is never going to be able to find the words that are in your heart. And you could tell AI everything about yourself. I'm telling you, AI is not going to write your memoir. It's just not.
Yeah, that is a big difference. But I think, like you said, we are maybe becoming a bit more rare, but I think at the same time, people are starting to want the book content more. I find a lot of people have gotten sick of these AI posts that all kind of sound the same. You can really tell that they're kind of all written in the same sort of patterns. And I feel like a lot of people are wanting a deeper connection to something now. They're wanting to read authentic things, real stories, things that have happened to people in their own words. I love trees, but I'm also one of those people that likes holding an actual paper copy of a book. There's something magical about it. And I feel like that is almost part of the healing journey, is in the end to be able to hold this in your hands and say, wow, this is me in these pages and I'm holding this. And
Yeah.
I've gone through a huge transformation while I wrote this, and now I'm holding this in my hand. So I do think there also is a kind of a place for us to return to all of that for a more meaningful connection, deeper communication and exchange between people. So I think there'll still be a place for writers.
That's really beautifully said. That's really beautifully said. There's a transmission that happens because as I'm writing, I'm laughing, I'm crying, I'm freaking out, I'm calming down, like as I'm writing. Like you said, it's in the pages. It's in the pages because those of us that read, you know that you feel all those feelings when you're reading. And that's not by accident. It's because the writer felt all those feelings when she was writing. And now you feel all those feelings. There's such a visceral transmission. And yeah, it's in the pages, it's in the words. It's so magical.
Absolutely. And it has a different impact on me, even as a reader, whether I'm reading it on like a sort of reading device, a digital device, or whether I have a book in my hands and I'm reading it through the paper pages. I find the impact on me is different as well, especially when we're talking about healing books. And I have stacks and stacks of the different modalities and different quantum healing and all sorts of things. And I always find that when I put them on an e-reader, because it's just easier if you go on a plane or something to take it with you that way, I never quite get the same emotional impact. I never quite get the same remembrance out of what I read than when I have the book in my hands. And so
you're highlighting it and you're folding the pages.
Different experience altogether between the two modes of taking it in. So yeah, I can feel definitely what went into the pages when somebody writes their stories. So from both an avid reader and a writer perspective, I do hope the books will be around for a long time to come.
You and me both.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we all have heard, I'm sure, about writer's block. I want to ask you about that in the sense of how does that impact our healing journey? Let's say when we're writing a book and we come to a point where we feel maybe, oh, I don't know if what I wrote, I can continue with that, or I can't even think how to finish that. Or maybe you're emotionally also in a place where you feel you cannot keep going at this point. How do you work for yourself and with your clients through maybe these spots where they become doubtful or hesitant or feel like they can't move forward with what they've been writing?
Yeah, I think writer's block is an umbrella term for a lot of different things. We think of writer's block as like, oh, I can't think of the next thing to write. And that's kind of one interpretation of it. And then there's some of the other interpretations that you described, which is like an inner critic interpretation, which is like, I have an inner resistance to this. I'm uncomfortable moving forward with this. And then there's just like, I don't know how to say this. I'm trying to say it and I'm not able to capture this. I think you have to tease them out. And it's like anything else. Like you can have a headache, but do you have a headache because you're dehydrated? Do you have a headache because you're hungover? Do you have a headache because you're getting sick? Why do you have a headache? And I think it's the same thing when you get to a pause in the writing. Is it a pause because you need a pause? Because you need a break and you need to do the things we talked about before. You need to take a nap. You need to take a walk. Is it a pause because you've gotten to a place of honesty in the writing that you're not ready to face, that you're terrified to realize the thing that you're writing? Are you at a pause because the narration has just stopped for a minute and it's sort of rebooting and you need to kind of wait for it to come back? Are you at a pause because you're challenged just with the language? How do I describe this? And what are the words for this? So depending on why the pause, I think there's different solutions for each. I would say that for the overwhelm, it's stop. You need to stop. You're not doing anybody any good if you're just powering through this, regardless of deadlines and whatever. I think mental health is the priority and you need to pause. If it's a resistance to something uncomfortable in the writing, then I think you go deeper. Then I think you figure out who can support me. How do I really get in here? How do I really tell this? That's a slowing down. Like when I was working with my client that I just referred to, we went really slow because she started to fast forward, which is something we do. And then. And I'm like, no, bring me in the room. What's the temperature in the room? What is the person saying? What does it feel like in your body? That's when you go really, 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 really slow. And then you get all the good stuff. That's how you do for that kind of resistance. Other kinds of resistance, not being able to capture the language. I read a lot while I'm writing. So I try to find memoirs that are similar in the genre of content. The Last Ceremony is a lot about farming and nature and medicine and psychedelics. So I'll listen. Oh, that's how they describe that. That's how they describe that. I'll be sourcing for language. Lack of creative inspiration, I'm probably draining myself on things. So if I just don't have that creative juice flowing, what activates the creative juice? Usually it's like finding a new cafe that I haven't been to, writing in a new environment, writing somewhere where I can be looking at the ocean. Like I usually have to kind of move into different areas, I have to move my body a lot. So does that make sense? It's like there could be a lot of different reasons why you feel stuck. And then there could be a lot of different solutions for the stuckness.
Yeah. I'm getting the sense that's a very individual and unique thing to each writer in a sense. So that will determine the best way for them to move forward. But what I'm also getting from what you've been explaining is that it's quite normal for us to possibly reach a point like that where we need to maybe just regroup, take care of ourselves, or dive deeper depending on what the situation is. So, yeah. Now, you work with clients on their writing. You also do your own writing. And if our listeners have been inspired by this different take on how we can actually embark on our healing journey, how could our listeners work with you? What kind of programs and services do you offer?
Yeah, I work one-on-one, and I have an author accelerator that's starting February 2025. It's a group program. It's a small group program. It's limited to 6 people, actually. So it's an intensive finish your manuscript. You can also come and join me for a writing retreat in West Palm Beach, which I mentioned. You can do 1 day or 2 days where we either map the manuscript and we figure out what the core story is so that you have a good map to start writing, or else we dive into parts of it, like you said, where you got stuck and you need someone to kind of help you get through the jungle of it and kind of find the path forward. And all of that is available on my website, which is just my name, Gabrielle Pelicci. And I'm very selective about working with people because you need a readiness. You need a readiness. You need a commitment. You need to block your calendar so you have time for writing. You need to understand that you're embarking on a journey. I have a lot of conversations with people before we start that journey together. And we might just work together for 1 day and that's it. And we might just plant that seed. Or my last client, we worked together for 13 months and we had no words when we started and we had a published book when we finished. I'm really just in the business of supporting others to bring this art into the world. I think this art is really important. I think it's really important. I think our untold stories, getting them out into the world is how we create personal and collective change. I just don't see another path forward until we're really opening our hearts and sharing those gifts and putting that art into the world. I just see us getting more disconnected, more dystopian, more disassociated. I think this is what bonds us together. It's as old as time itself, sitting around a fire and telling stories. It's like, it's our lineage, it's our culture, it's our voice, it's our humanity. And I think it's critical. I really think it's critical to being human. I want to support others to bring that forth. I want people to bring that into the world. And so whatever I can do to help with that is what I'm really passionate about.
Thank you for sharing that and this beautiful, beautiful explanation on why we need to keep telling our stories. And of course, podcasts are sort of one mode to do that, but writing is, I feel, a lot more personal and intimate because we're spending so much time on crafting these stories and making sure that they feel just right and sound just right and come across just right in our own voices and how we feel it. So there's a different kind of connection, I think, when we're writing. So absolutely. I will just let our listeners know here that we will be linking to all of Dr. Gabby's offerings in the show notes as well. So please check her website for the next workshop, for the next program, how you can connect with her. We'll link you up with the socials as well. And if you are thinking of writing a book, this might be a good time to connect with her and chat about that. Or if you're stuck somewhere, even better to chat with her and find out why that's happening and how you can possibly move forward. And if you've had an idea brewing for some time and you'd like to be an author, that could also be a really good start to think about how you'd want to write that and how that could be part of your healing journey. And you can contact Dr. Gabby for that and speak with her about that. And we'll be linking to all of that. So check out the show notes and have a look there. Well, this has been another incredible episode, and I really hope our listeners have enjoyed our journey into writing for holistic well-being. What a fascinating way to look at our holistic well-being, at our healing journey, and our own self-care. I feel like writing can also be part of our self-care. So thank you so much for joining me today and spending your time and sharing this wisdom that you have learned yourself with all of our listeners.
Yeah, this is one of the better conversations I've had. You're really, really good at this.
Oh, thank you. I'm really glad. I'm happy when my guests are happy.
You ask really beautiful questions. I really enjoyed this time with you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm glad you had a good time. That's usually the outcome that we definitely want from our podcast episode. So thank you for that. And I'm very much enjoyed your wisdom through your own writing journey that you're imparting to not just your clients, but also our audience today. So thank you so much for that, Dr. Gabby, and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Jōrni Podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Jōrni on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejorni.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.